Welcome to the Church Communications Podcast. We want to help you become a church communications expert. We understand it can be a challenging and ever-changing role because we've worked in the church too, which is why we built a community with over 25,000 church leaders that are ready to support and cheer you on. Your hosts for the show are Allred and Jahng, who want to help equip you to reach more of your congregation and community. This is the place where we'll talk shop with fellow practitioners and professionals about what's working, what's not, and what's next. Are you ready? Let's get started.
This episode is brought to you by Ramsey Plus, a money plan for real life. The brand new all-access membership from Dave Ramsey's company gives you the best money content, tools, and resources all in one place. Later on, we'll talk about how your whole church, your whole organization can actually get plugged in. But until then, you can start a free trial of the Ramsey Plus system over at www.daveramsey.com/CC trial. That's daveramsey.com/CC trial. Try it out for yourself and let us know what you think.
Well, Kenny, how are you doing?
Fantastic. Cannot be any bit better. It's one of those things where I've been having these ups and downs, these COVID ups and downs, these
and the COVID ups and downs are really high and really low. They're not in between. That's what I missed about before the pandemic, was like the betweenness of ups and downs. But like every other day, it's like, what's today gonna bring, right?
Every other day, I'm like on an hour-to-hour basis, man. It's been a ride. But yeah, there have been days where I'm all zoomed out. There have been days or weeks that I haven't, and this is one of those days that I am not. Looking optimistic, hope-filled, and just a lot of enthusiasm. I'm actually having fun here. I like spending time chewing the fat, talking business with you, Katie. And so let's just get to it.
Yeah. Okay. So today we're really talking about how your church should become a content producer. Here's the thing. Your church already is a content producer. Even if you think that you're not, you already are, because the Sunday morning event, Sunday morning worship, the Sunday morning service, whatever you would like to call it, is content. Like, it is primarily content. The worship service itself is content. The songs are content. The sermon is really amazing content that your pastor's producing week after week. And so we should be using it. And I guess my question for Kenny, I think, because he is like an expert at this, I think like the question is why your church needs to start thinking like being a content producer. Why is that?
Yeah, I think there's so I think you're right. The first, let's call it out. You are a content machine. You're on a 7-day production cycle for the most part. If you're a service, if you hold services on Sunday, you've got this base layer, and then there's all these other things that your church is doing. Whether or not you have a camera on there, recording it or not, you are in this 7-day cycle, and it's one of the few organizations in our culture that produces that much new content on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, outside of like the news organization, I just can't really think of any other
local business.
I mean,
what other local
even
business?
Nonprofit. Yeah, local business or nonprofit that's creating content on a weekly basis that is applicable to anyone's life. I don't know of any other thing that's doing it besides the church. And so, yeah, we really need to think about, what do we do with this content? I think for the longest, it lived for Sunday and then it died.
Yes, but today's world is different, right? I like to call it, we're living now in Netflix nation. People love on-demand content. They love live content. There's content all around us. And that is honestly how people are consuming content. And everyone says also, Katie, that there's this demise of like everyone's individualized. People don't have these shared experiences. But look, you've got Netflix parties, watch parties. People have that communal experience. So you've got just a whole smattering of options for how to engage with people. Yep. And that's the number one thing. We want to engage with people in a way that fits into their lifestyle, gets their attention, and then brings them into our community as a church. Right? Yeah. And so that's That's I think from my point of view, it's one of those things that you have to recognize the modality of how people engage today in culture with
Mm-hmm.
things, and entertainment and content is all around them, especially digital, and that's the opportunity here. So, Katie, I guess the next question in my mind after that then would be like, why should you as a church be focusing on like felt needs? Like if you're embracing content production, what are you focusing all the content on? And we like to talk about felt needs as a target. Can you share a little bit of that philosophy?
Yeah. So you even going back to episode 1, you know, with Trey, felt needs really are what are the common struggles, you know, that your church is facing, and not just the common struggles, but then also the common struggles of your community. Today in COVID, we have some unique common struggles. One being food needs, another being money, like financial needs, another being community needs, like just the need for community, like the need to belong somewhere, the need to communicate with people. You know, it's really changed so much during COVID, and your church is uniquely positioned to provide an answer for all of these needs. But the question is really, are we creating content around those felt needs that help answer? And so what is, you know, Kenny, what are some practical content ideas that churches can create to answer felt needs?
Well, I think I think it's like a blank canvas, because first of all, not many other churches in the country or even your area are serving the felt needs of your community. And so that allows you to, one, experiment and see what fits into the DNA and personality of your church. But I do think that, I think it's just that this cornerstone idea of we are no longer in a society or culture where people just assume that religion and salvation, how you get to heaven, that's not assumed. That's not on everyone's like bucket list. And so trying to talk about felt needs, I think is real. No, not in most communities. In fact, like I think you would be repelling people if you just went up to people in the grocery store or Home Depot.
It's interesting how that changed in American culture, you know, in the last 200 years, right? Yeah, people are repelled by the idea. It was, you know, remember Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And like, it was very, I think that whole mentality was about the end of your life. Like, what did the end of your life look like? And where do you go after the end of your life? And people are not so focused on that right now. They're very much YOLO, you know, that's our culture, like instant satisfaction. What is in it for me right now, because we're not promised tomorrow, and they're not thinking about tomorrow. And so how do we reach a culture that is speaking into that, you think?
Yeah, so I think it's really being crisp on the felt needs. So like, you know, just think of the common needs of most or many families in your community. It's pressures from work worries, and that it bleeds into relationship issues, how to structure those things. There's biblical worldview approaches to how to have a healthy relationship with a partner or spouse, how to have a faith and work integration when you're in the workplace, even if it's in contrast with everyone else's moral or ethical groundings. How to deal with money. Money obviously is also at the top of the list. So those are some of the common things, and I think that's something that's those are not things that you should be allergic to or scared about or apprehensive about, but rather the other way around, because in the end, you have the answer. You have a biblical grounded worldview that allows people to give them a framework of thinking that is logical and that makes sense across all the different spheres of their life. Right?
Yeah. So what are some practical ideas for churches who want to start creating this content, you think?
So there's a great church in Boston that we know. Yeah. It's called Grace Church. Our friend Brian, who's the executive pastor there, just this past week was actually on a webinar that they promoted to the general public. And I think that's just a fantastic idea. First of all, how many churches do you know conduct webinars for the public? And
yeah, they second, really should be though. Why not?
It's just one of those things where I think if you talk to Brian and his team, they stumbled upon the idea and then said, why
Mhm.
not? This just seems very
Yeah.
logical. So
And
what they're
what
doing
was
is they're,
that felt need? Yeah,
yeah,
what was it
so
like?
they tried, I think they've tried two different topics. One was in this COVID world and everyone going back to school and being concerned, et cetera. And a lot of schools are forcing online education versus in person. People are
Right.
thinking like, oh, we should homeschool. And homeschooling is relatively popular in the Christian circles. And most
Right.
churches probably have at least
Offer
one family
homeschooling.
that might be homeschooling. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. And so doing a webinar interviewing parents who have homeschooled to talk about the benefits and the pros and the cons and the approaches, what it literally is all about is something that I think is attractional. The other one was just personal finance. That's, again, it's a very common thing, is the felt needs we were talking about. They're attracting 50, 70 people to these webinars that are talking about those issues and sharing
And those are
some
50
real
to
life examples.
70 people who are not in their church, right?
Yeah, the majority of those people, they're doing Facebook ads or they're doing flyers, they're doing other promotion throughout the community locally.
Yeah.
And with Facebook ads, you can actually do what we call geotargeting. You put a stake in the ground, you can say, oh, within 30 miles of here or whatever, you can target the general population.
Which is the smartest thing to do for the church, especially that geo-targeting, because you don't want to waste your ad money on the entire United States. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that you should, hopefully witness. I mean, Jesus did call us to all of Judea or whatever. But I do think that maybe you need to just focus on your target area, like 30 miles around your church probably is enough.
And most churches don't know that's available, right? So they look at Facebook ads, they just think it's a money pit. If you do it strategically and with some boundaries, I think it can be helpful. So anyway, they're recruiting 50 to 70 to a webinar. And what I love about what happens is, so again, on Wednesday, it was Wednesday evening because most adults work. And so it was in the evening. I was on there and they were answering questions and the chat window was it was
blowing
live.
up.
People, it was blowing up. And they're asking about, you refer to this book. What's the name of the book?
Yeah. What's the curriculum that you're using?
Yeah, that kind of thing. And so he referred to a class that they have in their church. And at the end, he offered everyone, hey, we're going to start up another round for the class. If you'd like to sign up, we will follow up with everybody here. And so everyone's like, yeah, how do I sign up? How do I sign up? He could not get that information out quick enough. And so actually what happened is that class is actually an FPU class, the classic Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University class. And because we're in COVID, everything's being done online. And so he's inviting everyone to a 6-week class. So it's abbreviated. I think FPU is actually 9 weeks now, nine class sessions. They're doing 6 online. And what they're doing is they're flipping the classroom like Khan Academy. People watch the video lesson on their own, and then they come and discuss it every week for 6 weeks. And so that's the next step.
Yeah, Trey told me even that they've built some, Zoom tools or something that people can use while teaching FPU. And so for small groups specifically, there's a lot more information and stuff that they've created specifically for people teaching these. And he said he really sees, and they'll do kickoff parties and stuff in the office for you. And he really does see that is going to become more relevant and definitely more of the normal as we move forward, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's just one way of doing it. I think, Katie, maybe we can just brainstorm here, maybe 1 or 2 other ways to talk about, like parenting is a felt need, or.
Okay. So if we were going to talk about parenting, if we we're going to do felt needs about parenting, what would be a landing page? For example, what would be a landing page? You're a parent. I'm not. So you're going to have to tell me when you're a parent, what do you search for like teenagers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think
maybe like how to discipline your teenager.
That honestly is one of those things that it's all the things that parents talk about on the sidelines of soccer while their kids are playing soccer and stuff. It's all the stuff that, when you have coffee with the parents, you end up talking about the struggles and the challenges, right? My kid is acting out. What do I do? Or problems at school. And many times it's problems that our child has with relationships at school, whether it's bullying
Right.
online, whether it's, you know,
Yeah.
pressures, social pressures, things like that. So I think an easy way to do that is honestly some support groups or affinity groups, like
Sure.
in this day and age, creating some Zoom rooms where you
Yeah.
have some drop-ins and you talk about one or two principles about biblical parenting. I think would be great. I think those are
You know
one
what
thing.
I think would be
Another felt
great?
need is, yeah,
Hold
go
on,
ahead.
hold on. I'm going to pause you. I think what would be great if you want to find these parents is to create a Facebook group for parents in your area that is owned by the church, but not necessarily marketed by the church. So what I mean by that is like it's owned by a member of your church and they take ownership of it. But at the end of the day, it's not overtly churchy. And that way, you know, all people of all, you know, steps and faiths, you know, steps of life and faith can join in there and then share really great, you know, parenting information in general, share parenting, like share great events for kids and for teens and for that kind of stuff that happen in your area in there. And then use that as a funnel for getting people to come to these Zoom events through your church, like these webinars that we're talking about, with really great, interesting topics like, you know, my child's acting out. What do I do? How do I discipline? You know, what, you know, my child's grades are going down. What do I do? So, you know, I think that would be just so beneficial for so many churches. It starts, and that's not even with ads, right? That's like free. And so what you can really do, what's really cool, is you can actually get in your church, tell like 100 people, right, what you're doing, maybe in an email. Send them an email, say, hey, we're creating this Facebook group for parents. We chose you to be a parent in this group, and we want you to add other parents. We want you to add people who don't go to our church. We want you to add people that you think are far from Christ, but could use help parenting. And don't tell them, you know, but our plan is to help them eventually. This would be an easy way for you to invite them to church, to take the next step for church. And so, you know, what does that look like? And so, yeah, I think just creating those parenting groups and naming it specifically after your local area. So I live in Mobile, Alabama. It'd be Mobile, Alabama Parents. Okay. That's already a magazine. Okay. But so it already has some traction, but I don't think they have a Facebook group. And so,
Imagine
you know,
if you
name
owned
it
it though.
that.
Imagine if you were the facilitator for Mobile, Alabama Parents Group, and that anyone who's a parent can join that. I think that would be wonderful. Though
I think you
that's
would
the
easily
thing.
get 1,000 to 3,000 people in there quickly. It wouldn't take a lot, I don't think.
So I think the one thing to flag here is that we are flipping the model of how pastors and leaders might be thinking about what we're trying to do here. Typically, the old school model has been, you need to force Christ onto people, force the issue, and convert them to Christ, and then you build community with those people. And here what we're doing is the other way around, is saying, let's build community and relationships first. Earn the right to talk about Christ, earn the right in terms of relationship with people, earn the trust, and then we can bring them along and introduce Christ into you don't need to lead with overtly religion in terms of a topic with every single
Which is
thing
what
that
Jesus
do.
did. Yes. Right? He was not overtly religious. He did not like the religious people who were overtly religious. He wanted to come alongside you, serve you in the felt need that you had, build a relationship with you. And then after he has built this relationship, has served you, people were like, oh, I should follow you. Like, you are a wonderful human. This is, you know, I want to have a relationship with you. Right. And that's all we want, is people to have a relationship with Christ. And so in order to have a relationship with Christ, they first, most of the time, have to have a relationship with you, because Christ lives in you. And so, you know, how can we build these relationships without intimidating people and scaring them off first? It really is one of those very, I don't know, it's one of those really hard things to do, but is worth it long term if you could figure out the strategy. It's funny because you said it's a new way, but Kenny, it's almost an old way.
Yeah, it
churches
is.
have been building affinity groups for a long time. They had basketball teams and kickball leagues doing this kind of same thing in the past, but they still put this overtly Christian, like this is this church's basketball league or whatever. And so a dad would sign up for this basketball league, but he would never actually show his face on a Sunday morning. And so this is a different way of gaining those relationships, but doing it online where people really are right now. They're already there. They're not joining a basketball league anytime soon because of COVID. So this is the easiest way to kind of start those relationships so that we can build a bridge to gaining the trust so that we can eventually tell them about Christ.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that you can do in that parenting group, then after you have traction and engagement,
Mm-hmm.
then you can peel off, and whether it be book clubs or other things that you might do in smaller groups where relationships really do flourish, where it's like, oh, I'm meeting Katie and we're interacting regularly on a much smaller basis instead of a group of 1,000 or more.
Mm-hmm.
Then we actually have that relationship that could go offline and then turn into, hey, our church is doing a book club on this, our church is doing, just inviting them to events, etc.
Yeah.
Those are the types of things that I think work on felt needs. Finances right now are important because people are unemployed, they're stressed out. Getting out of debt is a huge issue. Pairing up with a financial planner or financial coach in your local community might be something worthwhile, where you're saying, hey, we're going to create this group locally and have a free resource here to answer questions about personal finances.
And Dave Ramsey does have coaches now, and of course they have endorsed local providers as well. So I mean, it's probably worth looking into those resources. But again, it doesn't just have to be about parenting. It could be about financial advice, like we just said. Like you could create a group that's like Mobile, Alabama Financial Club. I don't know. People would be like intrigued enough that they're like, huh, what does this mean? And then
hobbies and interests.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, dogs. That's a big one, right? Mobile Alabama dogs. Yeah, it's a huge one, right? That's a big opening. You could just love knitting, and that could be your felt need. People want to talk about knitting. Okay, that's fine. There's literally so many different kinds of groups that you could create, but the thing is you have to create it. You have to take ownership of it. It takes time. It's not something that's going to suddenly happen overnight most of the time. I have seen it happen overnight for, there's a community in New Orleans that created a group right when COVID started, and within 24 hours they had 7,000 members. And it was literally called like NOLA Needs or something like that, or West, something like that. It was called
NOLA Needs. You're right.
Like
North Louisiana, right? NOLA Needs.
Yeah, I think so. And so anyway, it was just crazy how quickly they gained so many members, and it became incredibly helpful. There were some really amazing stories that came out of that from people who weren't even, members of their church, how they were giving back and helping people. And so, I mean, that's a group that was literally created for needs. Like it was literally called Needs. And people joined it uber quickly. I mean, it was on the news and everything. So, I mean, this does work. You can also just join groups that already exist, neighborhood groups, those kind of things, give back, give, great advice, go in there and answer questions and be extremely helpful. And that's one way to do it. Especially if you're intimidated by it, I would get involved in a group that's already existing and then see how they do it. But if anything, man, I just really want to challenge people to create some groups that lead to really great change because of these felt needs that they're answering in their community. We can create great content that feeds to these felt needs too. And we've talked about that in several other podcasts. We talked about in our last season, how you can create landing pages and keywords and those kind of things, which you need to do as well. But there's ways to meet people where they're already at online. And this is just one.
Yeah, I think people will be surprised also of just how many people are looking for community, and they're looking for like that dog example. I was just thinking, like, my area, there is and it's not online. I don't think it is. And you could create one online, a Facebook group, but there's a corgi dog group that they have an annual. Do you know what a corgi dog? Those small corgi dogs.
Yes.
And so they do
the Queen
a meetup.
Has corgis.
Yes. So they do a meetup at the local dog park, and like 400 or 500 corgis come in one day and descend to the dog park. And it's a crazy affair. I've seen photos of it, but that's a community, right? And that's something that you can actually build up. Even I was just thinking about our friend Bo, who is Lunchbox Dad on social for parenting. There's people are always looking for how do I cook interesting meals for my kids that they'll actually eat, and you can feature fun tips and recipes and things like that. Crock pots. There's a whole crock pot community in every single town, right?
Oh man, people love the crock pot.
Meal prep groups. There's so many ideas out there that I think that the whole point is start one and see what happens. And your mission right now is to expand your circle of influence. So it's not just your building. You don't have your building anymore right now for a lot of churches. And so how do we do it in other ways? Felt Needs is definitely a way to do that. Yeah.
So this podcast started about talking about content producing and ended with creating groups. And I like it. I think they both feed into each other. Yeah, I think 100% they feed into each other. And I think, I don't know, I think churches need to figure this part out. They needed to figure it out before the pandemic. Obviously, Kenny, I've been preaching this since 2016. This is not new for me. I've been literally saying the exact same thing for 4 years now. And I've seen a lot of churches, and I've seen a lot of people gain so much from it when they do implement it, but it's always scary to start. So get started. And then I think, God brings the harvest. You just have to start, you just have to get started. So,
well, I think that the thesis to this episode basically is you need to be a content producer. You need to think about felt needs, and then that could be a driver for the type of things that your church is known for and the connection point. And that's how you produce content. So part of the problem with content production in the churches that you and I coach and consult with a lot of times is writer's block. They just don't know. They just want to throw out more Bible verses, and they think that is the thing that's going to attract everybody. That will attract some people who are curious and seeking, but that's not the entire decision spectrum. Right. And if you want to focus in on some felt needs that the community has, that's going to open the door and let you be a content producer that you're just going to find tons of ideas to start running with, basically. Yeah, so
I agree.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that's the thesis, and I think you're right. Comes down to social. Social is the tool that's at your fingertips, and I love that we're always coming back to these best practices that, Katie, you're leading our entire community of 27,000 church leaders inside a group, and then you're talking about how to use groups for their own purposes. This is just it's just another example or another way to add to that list, right?
Yeah, I think so. And so in conclusion, we've been talking a lot about all these different felt needs, but when it comes to finance, when it comes to things about money, I think the Ramsey team has got you covered. Figuring out, giving everyone in your church or organization the tools that they need to budget and save and take control of their money is easier than ever with Ramsey Plus, and you can use that with an online virtual small group that you can start on Facebook and lead to Zoom. It's Financial Peace University and so much more. Ramsey Plus, so exciting. The Ramsey Plus team has put together a demo webinar you can watch at daveramsey.com/cc webinar. Again, that is daveramsey.com/cc webinar. So go and check it out. Thanks for joining us today. We are so happy to have you, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Church Communications Podcast with Katie Allred and Kenny Jahng. If you liked our show today and want to learn more, you can join our Facebook group with over 25,000 church leaders. Simply search for Church Communications on Facebook. And if you liked today's episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review. It's the most impactful way you can help us reach more church leaders and equip them to become better communicators for the church. And finally, don't forget to check out our website at churchcommunications.com. Thanks for listening.